Welcome to e-Padashala PG courses for computer science. In the web technology subject, today we are going to see web services part 1. So, the objectives of this module is to learn about the web services, what is a web service, what are the different types of web service, how to understand the architecture of web services, what are the different types of architectures and how to understand the architecture, and to know about the implementation of various web services. And with a small example, we are going to see about the creation of a new web service. First, let us see about the fundamental concepts why web services comes to the picture. So, there is a computing technology called as distributed computing technology, where the distributed computing technology consists of COM, DCOM, CORBA, RMI, etc. CORBA means it is Common Object Request Broker Architecture. Actually, it is a standard based vendor neutral and language agnostic architecture. This is a complicated way of utilizing the power and flexibility of the internet. This is a middleware. This COM, DCOM and RMI are considered as middleware, whereas the service is provided by a third party person or the service is provided from the remote location and the client utilizes the services of it. COM and DCOM are Microsoft products. So, the distributed computing platform, this COM and DCOM are closely tied with Microsoft and they come with the things called as OLE, COM, ActiveX, etc. Next, the next technology is called as RMI, where RMI stands for Remote Method Invocation. This RMI is a Java based effort and this works well for Java, but it doesn't works well with other languages. This of course is a good combination for a J2E platform which is integrated with RMI and IIOP. This RMI remote method invocation, in the sense the service what do we want to acquire is available with the remote machine. The client can utilize the service of the remote machine and makes use of these things done. But the problem with all of these things is RMI is restricted to Java platform, COM is restricted to Microsoft, and CORBA, even though it is very powerful, it has its own complications. So, in this evolution, in order to have a better distributed component or in order to have a better service component which can service the consumer, the evolution which comes is called as web services, which is brought by W3C. Web services can be called more as an evolution rather than a revolution. Okay. Now, let us see about the introduction of web services. What happens here? First, let us see how to share the data between the devices in the network. You can see the clients can be a tab, monitor or a PC or a tab, or it can be a mobile phone. The servers are there, the databases are located within the server. All of these clients wants to access the data which is available within the database, and all of these things gets connected through the local network or the internet, which has been established with proper firewalls and security. But now they want to share the data between these devices in a fully connected network. Okay. So, how the sharing of data can be done? The solution is nowadays web service. So, the web services, this uses standard web protocols. You know that web means it makes use of the HTTP protocol. Web pages makes use of HTTP protocol to retrieve the things from the server. So, this web services uses standard web protocols like HTTP. So, HTTP, you all know that it is supported by almost all of the web browsers, web servers and many of the programming languages today. Even though it is a web service which has been taken from a remote machine, only through the HTTP protocol of the connection, it connects between the clients and the server. Okay. Now, before going to this, let us see what is a web service. You can see from the figure that web service is a network accessible interface. Web service is nothing but an interface which connects between the application client and the application program. So, this connecting application client and application program is taking place through a network accessible interface, and this uses standard internet technologies like our HTTP protocols. So the clients of the web service, he or she doesn't know that what sort of service has been implemented. There is no need to know about the implementation details. The implementation details is completely hidden or abstract about the web services to the client. Okay. Now let us see. We have already seen that the history of the web service, this has been evolved from previous technologies which serves the same purpose, such as RPC, ORPC, where in ORPC we have seen that COM, DCOM, CORBA, RMI, all of these things makes use of this. Where RPC stands for remote procedure call, it is nothing but invocation of a remote method from a remote machine. The same thing Java RMI also, which invokes the remote method from the remote machine. This COM component, DCOM distributed component object model, all of these things does the third party service, whereas now web services has been evolved from all of these things technologies. What about the intention of the web service? Web services is intended to solve three main problems. The first one is interoperability, the second one is firewall traversal, the third one is complexity. Let us look through that one by one. The first one, let us look through the firewall traversal. Collaboration across the corporations was an issue because distributed systems such as CORBA and DCOM uses non-standard ports. The ports which has been used by them is not standardized. Because COM is DCOM is Microsoft product, CORBA comes from Open Research Group. Okay, they have used different standard ports. Now, the usage of web services, it makes use of HTTP as a transport protocol, and most of the firewalls allows access through the port number 80 of HTTP. Since this is a common port or a standardized port, this leads to easier and dynamic collaboration. The second one, let us look through the complexity of the web services. Web services is a very developer friendly service system. Most of the above mentioned technologies such as RMI, CORBA, COM, DCOM, everything involves a whole learning curve. So the new technologies and languages have to be learnt by implementing these services. Okay. Now let us look through the definition of a web service, a more precise definition. A web service means it is going to be an application component that communicates via the open protocols like HTTP, SMTP, that is Hypertext Transport Protocol, Simple Mail Transport Protocol. It makes use of these protocols. Then it processes XML messages framed using SOAP. We will see what is SOAP in the forthcoming slides. So what is this? Processing XML messages. Already you have learnt about the modules of XML. So probably you may know about the XML. What is XML? What about the XML messages? So this web service processes XML messages which has been framed using SOAP. Then describes its messages using XML schema. So every XML message has been described or validated using an XML schema. Apart from that, it provides an endpoint description, that is the description about this particular web service has been defined using WSDL, that is this WSDL has been spelled as or called as WSDL, where WSDL stands for Web Service Description Language. So using Web Service Description Language, every web service which has been written in an XML form has been described using WSDL. Now, after creating a web service, if you want to discover the web service means, then the discovery can be made using UDDI. So these are the three main components of a web service. Apart from an XML message, the three important terminologies are SOAP, WSDL and UDDI. Let us go through these components in the forthcoming slides. Now let us look through the evolution of the web service. Actually, initially TCP/IP has come in the market. The purpose of TCP/IP protocol or TCP/IP is going to be the connectivity, and the applications which are using it is email application, FTP applications, that is mail application, FTP file transfer. All of these applications makes use of this protocol, and the outcome is only based on this thing, the creation of the web has emerged. Later, the usage of HTML technology comes to the picture. The purpose of the HTML is purely meant as a presentation layer. It is used for formatting of text or to present the text in a well-defined manner. The application of this HTML is going to be the creation of static web pages. So, enormous amount of web pages has been created in the web using this HTML technology. The outcome of this technology is obviously more and more users started browsing the web. Next comes the evolution of XML. XML is an extensible markup language. You have studied already. The purpose of the XML is not about the presentation. It deals with the data. It increases the programmability. So, the application of this XML is the creation of web service, where application of the HTML is going to be the creation of web pages, where the application of XML has been extended to the creation of web services. So, the outcome of this technology is rather than browsing the web, you can program the web using this technology. Okay. So, this is about the web evolution. Now, let us look through the different types of web services. There are mainly two types of web services. One is called as SOAP based web services, the other one is called as RESTful web services. These are the two different types. Okay. But here we are going to study about the SOAP based web services. Okay. Now let us look through the advantages of web services. In web services, advantages are platform independence. So we have seen already that it is portable across the platforms. It is portable irrespective of the products which has been introduced earlier. Then the second one is reusability. Once a web service has been created, it can be reused many number of times. Then interoperability. This is that is web services created in one platform can be operated or used in another platform. Then scalability. You can scale up the number of services to any extent and discover and register all of these services in UDDI. Then adaptability, all the web services are easily adaptable. So, these are the advantages of web services. Okay. So, before going to the web services implementation, let us look through the three major web service components apart from XML. See, if we take XML, there would be four web service components. Since you know XML, the three terminologies which are more important are SOAP, UDDI and WSDL. XML, you all know that it is an extensible markup language which is a uniform data representation and exchange mechanism. It is a format which is used for a successful data representation as well as an exchange mechanism in which data can be exchanged between the machines without any confusion. Now, let us look through these three components. SOAP, which is called a Simple Object Access Protocol. So, SOAP is a protocol. SOAP is basically a protocol which is a standard way used for communication between the computers in the network. So, this is a standard way of communication through which web services can be invoked and the results or responses can be generated to the client. So, if you open the SOAP message or if the SOAP message is composed of an XML message basically. So, this is what the relationship between SOAP and XML. Next comes UDDI. UDDI stands for Universal Description, Discovery and Integration Specification. This is a mechanism, or UDDI is of course called as a registry, which is used to register the web services that has been created and to locate the web service based application. Then the third one comes WSDL. People call it as WSDL. It is actually WSDL, Web Services Description Language. This is actually a standard meta language. This meta language describes the services, different types of web services which has been offered. All of these web services are of course registered in UDDI and the description of this web services is provided by WSDL file. So, these are the three components of web services. Now, let us look through the technologies one by one. You have already learnt about XML technologies. I am just going to give you a precise view of it. So, you all know that it is a powerful thing for data representation and data manipulation. The XML itself has been called as the base document standard, and the XML schema is used for structuring the XML document, or based on the structure of the XML schema we can validate the XML document. Then XSLT, this is used for transforming XML to other XML formats or HTML formats. So it is of course called as a translation language. Then parsing strategies which are used for XML document processing are two parsing strategies. One is DOM parser, the other one is SAX parser. Whereas DOM parser stands for document object model, but SAX parser stands for simple API for XML. All of these things you would have studied in the previous modules. So the other part of the things which are used in XML are XPath and XQuery. XQuery is very similar to an SQL, which is used to query the data from an XML document, where XPath is used to describe an expression. Using that expression, or XQuery makes use of this expression to query the required data from the XML database. Okay. So this is about XML. Now let us go through the web service. Okay. How does a web service works? So you can see here there is a PC. Here PC acts as a client. First, PC searches for a web service, that is the PC wants to perform its operation, so that it requires a web service. That web service has been searched from the registry. So the registry is here called as UDDI, because all of the web services has been registered here. So the PC searches from the UDDI. Once the UDDI has given the appropriate response about the web service, you can see that it sends a WSDL file, that is number 2, from the UDDI back to the client. So once it gets the WSDL of the particular web service, through a proxy server, it sends a request to the listener. So the request is basically a SOAP message, the request which has been sent from the client to the appropriate service owner is called as a SOAP message. SOAP message is nothing but it is composed of an XML message. The listener is going to be the person who possesses that web service, in which you can see in 5. So from the web service, it executes the processing, or it executes the results and sends the response back to the client. So this is what the whole scenario in which a web service can work. Okay. So these are this can make you clearly to understand what do you mean by web service architecture. So this is of course a very simplest web service system which has two participants. So one participant is called as producer, the other one is called as consumer. Producer can also be called as provider, whereas consumer can also be called as requester. So the consumer requests for a particular web service to the provider or the producer. It executes the process, it generates results and sends the results back to the consumer. So you can see that the provider presents an interface and implementation of the service, and the requester makes uses of this web service. Okay. Again you can see one more architecture. This is a very simple web service architecture which involves a direct interface between the producer and the consumer. The second architecture is called as SOA, which is service oriented architecture. Here in the service oriented architecture, the producer cannot see, if we make use of RPCs on those days, a remote procedure can call the remote machine directly, and the process gets executed there and the results can be sent back to the client immediately. This is a very simple, or this is the very basic service architecture. But nowadays we make use of only SOA, which is service oriented architecture. This is a more sophisticated system in which it comprises of 3 things: a registry, provider and a consumer. You can see that a registry is sitting between the consumer and the producer. Here registry, I told you already that registry is an UDDI. The registry acts as a broker for this web services. Only with the help of these brokers, the consumers can identify where the service is located. So a provider means, provider is nothing but like a server who wants to publish the services. So after having a service, it just publishes in the UDDI saying that these are the set of services which is available with me. So it publishes all of the services available with them to the registry. So the registry is like a index, or registry is like a broker which consists of the number of services, who is providing that service, and what is the URL of that particular service. All of these things are stored in the UDDI registry. Now a consumer can discover the services in the registry. So the consumer who wants to perform a particular service, who wants the remote service or who wants a web service, goes and searches in the UDDI registry. Once it finds the appropriate service in the UDDI, once it discovers the appropriate service in the UDDI, the consumer sends a request to the provider, make the process done and get the results back from the provider to the consumer. So this is what the architecture, what we are seeing. Okay. Now let us look through the web service components. Already I have told you that apart from the XML, there are 3 web services components. One is SOAP, the second one is called as WSDL, and the third one is UDDI. First, let us look through the SOAP. SOAP means it is an industry accepted W3 specification for a ubiquitous XML distributed computing infrastructure. Okay. SOAP is a mechanism. This is used for defining the unit of communication. Already I told you that SOAP has been used for defining the unit of communication, or unit of communication here is called as SOAP. So this SOAP mechanism can be easily used for error handling. This is an extensible mechanism and it lives about the transport layer of OSI. It simply puts a mechanism which allows the transmission of XML documents regardless of transport layer protocol. So regardless of the transmission in the transport layer protocol, it allows only the transmission of XML documents. So here you can see SOAP messages, that is the logical structure as well as the physical structure of the SOAP messages. SOAP has been gone as an attachment, or even you can say, see that SOAP is an envelope. The header of the SOAP is going to be optional, whereas body of the SOAP is required. So SOAP goes as an attachment. You can see the SOAP envelope. The header part of the SOAP is optional, but the body part is required. Fault elements, if we want, we can have it, otherwise we can leave it. So the root element of the SOAP message is the envelope element. So envelope is nothing but the outer covering. It contains an optional header element, and the required body element called false can be used for exceptional situations. Sometimes it may contain some optional attachments also, which is used for encoding or exchanging binary data. So once you open the SOAP envelope, we can see only the XML messages inside. Okay. This is a SOAP example. You can see a structure of a real SOAP message. So the envelope consists about the address, that is schema, what is the namespace which has been given for the SOAP. Then you can see the header part. So some content can be given in the body part. Again the SOAP envelope has been closed. Okay. So this is what SOAP message transmission. The SOAP sender creates and sends a SOAP message to an ultimate SOAP receiver. So you can see one sender there, you can see one receiver there. So apart from that is apart from the SOAP sender and receiver, one or more optional SOAP intermediaries can be positioned. So these intermediaries can intercept the messages which has been transmitted between the sender and the receiver. Sometimes they may perform filtering, logging, catching, etc. So the SOAP sender's intended destination is the SOAP receiver, but between these two people there is a possibility that some SOAP intermediaries can occur. Okay. Now let us look through the second web service component, which is called as WSDL, Web Services Description Language. WSDL is an XML based language. This is used for describing web services and how to access them. This WSDL has been developed jointly by Microsoft and IBM. WSDL is an XML based protocol. Again, SOAP consists of XML. WSDL also has been called as XML based protocol. This is used for information exchange in decentralized and distributed environments. And this is a standard format which is used for describing about a particular web service or for defining about a particular web service. So again, if we say what WSDL definition describes, We said already that this is a format which is used for describing a web service. Now let us learn what it describes. It describes how to access a web service and what operations it will perform or what operation it is intended to perform. So that has been defined in WSDL definition. So WSDL is a language which is used to have an interface with XML based services. Okay, WSDL is the language that UDDI uses. I told you already that it is pronounced as WSDL and spelled out as WSDL. This is basically a language which is used to describe about the particular web service and what sort of operations this web services will perform. Okay. So, the next one you can see the major elements of WSDL. You can see both the physical aspects of WSDL as well as logical aspects. So, physical aspects is nothing but binding a service, port number of a service and actually what a service. That is, every service is going to get connected with a port number and some binding. If you go through the logical aspect, you can see that port type is available, the operation in which the web service is intended to, what is the message it is going to contain and part of it and type. All of these things corresponds to logical aspects. Now, let us see about the major WSDL elements. See, there are 8 WSDL elements. Type is one of the element of WSDL. That is, the top level of the WSDL file is going to be the definition. Apart from the definition, we can have 8 elements. The first one is called as types. So, the data type definition here is used to describe the messages exchanged. What sort of messages exchanged? That data type definition can be used here. Then message. What is the abstract definition of the data being transmitted in a message? Then again, the message may consist of logical parts in which each one of them, every logical part is going to have one of the defined type. Then operation. If we take the operation in WSDL element, everyone is going to have an input message and an output message. If we take port type element, it gives you the set of operations. Then binding, it specifies concrete protocol and data formats for the operations and messages defined by the particular port type. Then port, it specifies, apart from this part, this is a port which specifies an address for the binding. The service is used to aggregate a set of related ports. So, you can see here an example WSDL document with the occurrence of many types of elements. You can see that the parent element is going to be the definition. Inside the definition, data type definition, which gives the data type definition of the different messages occurs. Then definition of the data or the abstract of the data which is being communicated. What are the set of operations? Then protocol and data format has been given in the binding tag. So, all of these things corresponds to the structure of the WSDL document. Now, you can go through the web service stack. So, we all know that it works on transport layer which consists of these protocols. It makes use of HTTP protocol, we have studied already. So, the messaging goes as a SOAP message and the service description goes to be the next layer which follows WSDL, and the publication and discovery of the service has been made using UDDI. The UDDI means it has been extended from URI, WSDL means it has been extended from HTML, and SOAP has been extended from HTTP. So, this is the set of standards which is used for implementing web services. Now, the same thing you can see the basic web service usage scenario. You can see that a manual web service lookup is required for the machine which is lying on the left hand side. So, the left hand side is going to be a client application. Some client application has been written and some client application has been deployed in the machine. So, it wants to make a web service lookup. It sends either a HTTP GET request or POST request to the web service repository UDDI. When it goes to UDDI to HTTP GET, it receives the WSDL description from the repository. Once it receives the WSDL description from the repository, it identifies where the service occurs. Number 4, you can see once the services has been identified to the particular web service provider, it sends a SOAP request. Now the provider processes the request and sends a response, SOAP response back to the client. This is what the basic web service usage scenario. So the applications, you can see that web service application, the whole web service provider consists of 3 things: HTTP server, SOAP server and application server. So application server provides the implementation of services through WSDL and SOAP. SOAP server implements SOAP protocol. HTTP uses standard web server. Okay. So now let us summarize what we have learnt in this. We have learnt about the web services and its types. We understood that what are the components of the web services. We have seen what are the different architectures of web services, and we have learnt about the few implementation of web services. Thank you.